Well, this Sunday is a UN-designated day calling to end impunity for crimes against journalists. Russian leader Vladimir Putin is one of over 24 figures on Reporters Without Borders' 2025 list of press freedom predators. Russia is one of the most difficult countries to be a journalist, as reporter Julian Colling knows well. He moved to Moscow in 2017 as a correspondent for French media, including France 24's French channel. But in September, he was expelled from the country by Russia's FSB and remains banned from the territory for the next 5 years. He joins us now by video to tell us more. Julian, thank you so much for speaking with us, and it's very good to meet you.
Thank you for having me.
You've said that this expulsion wasn't entirely unexpected, though it was abrupt. Tell us what happened.
Yeah, it was kind of a surprise because I knew that I was being surveilled and under the radar a bit. Under the microscope of the Russian authorities. But the fact that I was banned for 5 years was quite a shock to me because it's one of the first cases of this kind. To be fair, it happened before to one English journalist from the BBC, for example, who was banned for life from Russia in 2021. But for the French correspondents, for the French corps, at least, I'm the first to receive such a ban for 5 years. But other colleagues as well have been also shown the door to, let's say, by having their accreditations or press visas cut and not extended. This is a way for Russia to, including my case, all these decisions are a way for Russia to basically limit and reduce the presence of, especially, of course, European and, let's say, Western correspondents in the country. But to go back to what happened to me, I was arrested twice on the field reporting this year in March and in May in the Kursk region and also close to the Finnish border. And apparently they didn't like that I was traveling maybe a bit too much to the Russian regions, going out of Moscow to report, going to see the real Russia. This is what the Russian authorities don't really like. And they made me pay for my reporting in a way by banning me, because otherwise I don't really see what I did wrong except just doing my job, basically. So it's a way for them, it's a way also to send a signal to the other remaining French colleagues and also Western colleagues who go in and out of Russia to report. The message is be careful, we're watching you, we're looking what you're doing, we are following your every move, and don't try to do anything maybe too in-depth or talk about certain topics like soldiers, grieving families, the war, basically. This is now off limits. And of course, it's getting harder and harder to work as a journalist, for sure. And also for Russian journalists, we can go into that later, but they're also the more at risk than us, even in the Russian territory.
Yeah, I've heard from other Moscow correspondents that one of them told me that they had to live in a designated apartment that they knew was bugged, so they were being listened to all the time by Russian authorities. Is that kind of thing just sort of expected among journalists in Moscow?
I think it's fair to say that, yeah, for sure. That wasn't the case before the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The situation got a lot worse, to be certain, since 2022. Maybe you remember also in 2023 there was the American reporter Evan Gershkovich from the Wall Street Journal, who was arrested, of course, in March 2023, and who spent 1.5 years in prison in Russia before being exchanged. His own apartment he knew was bugged. Basically, he was being followed for some weeks, for some months, even before being arrested. And this is something you have to deal with when you come work in Russia, whether it's like a permanent correspondent or as a reporter coming in and out with a short-term visa. You know that surveillance and especially FSB surveillance and people following you around can be one of the cards, especially once again in the Russian regions where they don't really like us to go. And so you have sometimes teams following you from afar. You have strange people coming to the restaurants where you have your interviews or meetings, just sitting next to you to make you understand that you're being watched and followed. And so this is basically getting more and more visible, and it's getting more and more tense once again to work in Russia. And you know that again, there's certain topics in certain regions that you shouldn't go to and shouldn't really try to cover. So it's like self-censorship in a way, unfortunately. But this is the way to go now in Russia, And again, I mean, yeah, it's not going to get better anytime soon because the tension, of course, also the diplomatic tension between our countries like France, Western countries, and Russia is getting even worse. So they're not going to make it easier on us anytime soon, for sure.
You mentioned the pressure that Russian journalists face as well. Kind of, if you were to compare the two, is it more complicated being a Russian journalist, or is it harder for the foreign correspondents?
There's no question it's much harder and much riskier, first of all, for the Russian journalists, because, I mean, let's be fair, most of the real and independent journalists left the country, of course. Most of them are now in exile, so the Russian independent media are all working from abroad, from like the Baltic states or from both based in Poland, sometimes in Germany, and the reporters also left the country for their own safety. But I know for a fact that these media, who are doing an incredible job still trying to get information and material from Russia, they are still working with a lot of independent freelancers and like people on the ground in Russia who work, of course, anonymously to limit the risks. And it's the most courageous people out there. They're really like they could be arrested any time. They could be also put into jail anytime because they are Russian. They have a Russian passport. There is still some kind of protection in a way for the Western journalists. But for the Russians, they are really out in the open, and it's really risky for them to keep working basically in Russia and keep contacting people, keep getting in touch with sources. The sources also themselves, Russian sources, also now are much more wary to talk to us, to talk to Russian journalists. They're really afraid of the consequences. There's a huge psychosis basically going on in Russia, and people don't really want to talk to the press anymore. And that's really understandable because people also risk going to prison or getting fines just for saying the wrong thing to the media. So the whole situation, the whole context and atmosphere is really extremely tense now. It's really hard to work in Russia for sure. And I have to tilt my hat to the Russian media again, who are still putting up stories, making field reports from the Russian territory, and that's really admirable.
And given that climate of fear and all of the pressure there is on journalists, do you feel like kind of the most essential stories are still managing to get out, or do you feel like there's a lot of information that is being repressed?
I mean, given the context and I mean, all in all, it's still quite, stories are getting out. This is what's, again, remarkable. And it's mostly the Russian independent media who are doing that. Again, it's mostly by contacting people from abroad. So they are mostly using like, crypted messengers like Signal or other apps of the kind. So they're still managing to get in touch with people who are ready to give information anonymously. And so if we're talking about really touchy subjects like, the deaths of Russian soldiers, the grieving families, the Russian wives of mobilized soldiers, for example, all these topics that the Russian security service really don't like, but there are still amazing and long reports coming out in medias like Novaya Gazeta, Holod, Meduza, all these media. But again, I mean, it's not as before. There's more censorship than before. People are more cautious, and it's not the same amount of material as before the war, of course. But I also have to say that my colleagues in the Western Corps, or people going in and out of Russia, like the New York Times, Washington Post, they still put up amazing stories, and there are still fixers and sources willing to work with them from inside of Russia, which is also really courageous. And like the topics are getting out. It's just a lot less than before, and people have to be extremely cautious with the words they use and the way they report these stories. Yeah.
It's important work, and I know that you will continue to do it from afar. Julian, thank you so much again for joining us today. That's journalist Julian Colling, a former Moscow correspondent for a number of French media, including France 24's French channel.